got to tell you, I'm so excited about this because I've known Mark, the brewmaster, for years, and he's a perfect combination of passion and intelligence and diligence, and he's just an amazing man. I can't wait to taste his new beers.
He's allowing us to come in during the construction phase.
We're lucky boys.
We are lucky boys. And he's, what I understand, he's putting some stuff in the can right now.
Yeah, let's check that out.
Hey, how you doing? Good. Welcome to Echoes. Cheers.
I am so excited about this. I can't believe you let us in before it's all pretty and dusty.
Oh, be my guest. It's just a lot of fun right now, just making beer right now.
Well, that's what it's all about. This place is huge. I love it.
It's awesome. This is our Mirror mash filter. It's one of...
I have never seen one before.
Yeah, there's only 2 in Washington State. The other one's at Red Hook Brew Lab up in Capitol Hill. The next 2 closest are at Alaskan in Alaska and at Full Sail in Oregon. So they use 60% of all the beer made on the planet is actually brewed with a Mirror mash filter. But the reason we don't know about them much in the small craft industry is that they only started making the micro mirror in like 2014, 2015. So we got one of the first ones.
So what exactly does this do?
This takes the place of the normal mash regimen, which has a false bottom and a lauter sparge cycle.
Right.
So what you do with this, instead of just cracking the grain and then letting the water get to it and the enzymes do their work, you grind it all the way to fine powder with a hammer mill. It's like flour, and it's just a mash mixer. Our total mash is 20 minutes. Then we pass it through the mash filter. This mash filter, every single plate fills up. And then there's air bladders that squeeze out everything afterwards.
Oh, just like a press on a wine press.
Exactly. And these things pull open and you end up with dry, powdered grain at the end. And the best part about it is we get 99% extract from our grain.
Say you must have incredible extraction. Because normally when they crack it, they only get like 45% water saturation.
Yeah, and a good brewery extract is 80, 85%, and we're getting 99, even sometimes 100%. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The downside is that because all the sugar's been removed, we can't find farmers to take it anymore because it doesn't have any sugar left in it. The cows won't eat it and the pigs won't eat it as food. Or won't eat it as readily. They have to mix it with other things, sugar and stuff. So it's a pretty neat way to brew. One of the big advantages is that we can brew with any grain, literally any grain. We've done 100% rye beers on this.
Well, that's hard.
It's really hard. I mean, you know, as a home brewer, you do half rye and you got a stuck mash.
Yeah.
For sure, you can do 100% rye. We've done 100% wheat many times. Some of the gluten-free guys have come and looked at it because they use millet a lot of times, and millet looks like chia seeds.
I know.
Yeah, and so they go through 4-hour sparges normally, and it'll take an hour on this probably, the whole total thing.
So much more efficient.
It's so much more efficient. So we can fill up a 60-barrel tank with this, with the same beer, with 3 brews, or we can fill up 3 different tanks with 20 barrels, 3 different beers in the same day. So it's a really nice way to scale. Extremely efficient. You also use a lot less water.
Yes, which is always important in these days.
Yeah, it's really important.
Well, look at, we got beer ready to go out.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we've been canning today. We've been canning the double IPA.
Well, I like what you're doing, so keep doing it.
Thanks.
So what do we have over here? We've got...
So here's the brew house, and we've got the big giant tall one is the hot liquor ton.
Right.
And that holds 45 barrels. So that's really size so that we can do 3 batches in a row.
Okay, yeah.
It's an interesting hot liquor ton. It's different than most. Most are jacketed and with steam jackets to keep them warm. Well, the engineers at Specific Mechanical that worked with us on designing this brew house realized that even when you jacketed a hot liquor ton, you would still have stratification in the tank with different temperatures at different places. So you needed to have a pump to circulate it anyway.
Absolutely.
Well, if you're going to have a pump to circulate it anyway,
you don't need
why not just put a heat exchanger and then put just an insulation around it instead of steam jackets? So we started thinking, well, yeah, but what size of heat exchanger would you need? Turns out the engineering shows that it's only that big. And I can heat 45 barrels of water in that thing. I turn on the boiler at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm ready to brew at 8.
Nice.
Yeah, it'll heat that 45 barrels. We're going to be doing a tasting room and much more local distribution.
Tap room.
So for a tasting room, what you really need is much smaller batches. I can't do 120 kegs for when I don't have cold room space. So I can't do 120 kegs in every batch.
But smaller batches stay fresher.
Smaller batches stay fresher, that's right. So now I got even 7-barrel tanks.
Wow.
And all the way up to 60, so we can do different sizes. And that's where the match filter really makes it feasible to do any different size batch. I do 7-barrel batches all the time. So lots of different sizes, gives us a lot of flexibility. For the beers that we sell a lot of, we'll do, 30-barrel batches. Like Monks, I've been doing 15-barrel batches, and Monks Indiscretion, I have to brew it all the time. I mean, I just have to constantly brew it. So Monks Indiscretion is an interesting beer. That was actually a beer I first called Humble Bastard Born of a Monk's Indiscretion. Was the first original name as a home brewer. So the guys in my homebrew club tasted the beer and they kept saying, "You've got to make this commercial." So I kept refining batches into it.
For your day job during that time?
During that time, I was a computer game developer.
Yeah, but this is so different.
It's so different.
You see what you're working on, you see the end product. You're doing it with a small team. I mean, this must be satisfying as hell.
It really is. I mean, for the last now 2 years, been brewing just over a year now at Echoes, and it's been 100% by myself. I mean, have volunteers that'll come in and help me can and help me label, but as far as the brew house, it's been just by myself, which is really interesting. But I think honestly, during COVID times, I was the luckiest person in the world. I had a job where I didn't have to talk to anybody. I got to order all my stuff. I got to work on what is, I think, one of the best breweries in the state as far as the equipment goes and the design. And it's just a lot of fun to get to, really learn this system and work on it by myself. It was pretty fun.
I think that the efficiency of your brewing operation here and the equipment that you have just takes you light years above other craft distillers. And then your knowledge and your incredible palate. I mean, damn.
The thing that's really cool about this brewing community is as tight-knit as the brewing community is in Washington State, and I'd say even in the Northwest, it's even tighter in Posebo.
Nice.
I mean, everybody here are friends. Everybody here will do anything for anybody else. If somebody runs out of something, nobody's going to say, well, that's my competitor. We don't consider ourselves competitors with each other. We consider the competitors to be Budweiser, Coors, Miller.
And they are.
Right? They are. They're the competition. Seltzer is a competition.
Oh.
I mean, honestly, as much as I like it and as much as I love it in our state, cider is a competitor. Oh. Brad and I got to design this sort of from scratch with a blank piece of paper. In fact, we tore this building down to bare metal, cut out the floors, re-poured the floors, put the floor drains in, and just had a blank piece of paper to start with.
That's what I'm so impressed with. Yeah. I mean, the whole vision, it's beautiful.
It's a luxury. Now, what we're doing is sort of what you had mentioned before and try to shoehorn in a tasting room, but it's actually working really well. We had to move this whole glycol system. You see this? So this is Swiss engineered cool fit pipe that runs glycol at 28 degrees, 24 hours a day. Everything in the brewery that needs to be chilled is chilled from this glycol, including the cold room. So we don't even have compressors on top of the cold room.
That's amazing.
So there's no heat being put out by it. It's all on the side. And it's all being chilled by that.
Which puts your carbon footprint in a really nice place.
Yeah. And one 408 volt chiller out back, 30 horsepower chiller does the whole job.
Well, on your canning machine,
we
saw it running a little bit earlier.
Yep. Yeah, so this is a micro canner. We just got this a little while ago. The nice thing about this one is it's small enough and slow enough. I hate to say it that way because it sounds like a bad thing, but it's small enough and it's slow enough where one person can do it by themselves.
That's so important.
It is when we're doing small batches. That said, it's usually way better to have a couple people like we did today.
Right.
2 or 3 people is even better, but one person can do it. And if I want to just do 10 cases of something, say I'm brewing a 7-barrel batch.
Right.
Okay, I could do 30 cases and still have 8 kegs. People say, well, do you not like hops? I love hops. I love hoppy beers too. I like all kinds of beers. It always disappoints me when somebody tells me, I only like dark beers, or I only like this kind of beer, or whatever. I'm just like, would you say that about food? I mean, really, would you say, I only eat beef? I mean,
Only eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah, that's right. All I eat is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's more like the...
That just tells me how underexposed they are to other styles.
It really is.
Even in the wine world, I tell people,
Yeah.
oh, I just like, a Merlot. Well, there's over 130 different red varietals, and I've got a lot of them here. Don't be stuck on one. It gets boring. What you like. That's right. What you like.
That's right. Yeah, there's so many different types of beers. I am never going to be able to get to them all here, but I'm going to try. I'm definitely going to start doing some lagers.
Well, all this talk of beer is making me thirsty.
Yeah, we should probably drink some, huh?
Try some.
Yeah, that's fine. It's always fun for me.
My favorite part.
All right, I'm going to trade some beers here.
Yeah. Well, what shall we start with?
Well, let's start with a new one for me. It's a Rauch beer. So, the beers of Bamberg in Germany.
And they were smoked. In fact, weren't all grains smoked until like 1700?
Yeah, that's true. They think that most German-style beers, particularly, and most beers of Europe, had a smoky quality to them because the only way they knew how to dry the malt was over fire.
Right.
And then Pilsner or Kell were one of the first to figure out how to dry the malt and have light malt. And at the same time, they got rid of the smoke. So Bamberg decided to keep that. In that whole city, if you go, there's Ochschneikerla and there's other great breweries there, and they make all smoked beers in Bamberg.
Really?
It's almost every beer in Bamberg. I don't think you could find a non-smoked beer in Bamberg.
We just added another thing to my bucket list.
Yeah, no kidding. So it's always hardwood smoked. They use beechwood there. And what I did, I got a beer from Ochschneikerla that just came out called the Lenten beer, or Fasten beer. I think they've changed the name.
For Lent.
It was made for Lent. So it was much milder on the smoke than a lot of the Rauch beers. And I thought that would be better for the American palate. Something a little subtler, good smoke quality, a little bit sweet on the palate, like dark malts, but not overpoweringly smoky. So that's what we did to this. I used the Kolsch yeast and I treated it just like a lager.
Okay.
So I fermented it cool.
Takes a long time.
And then, lagered it for quite a while. So you end up with a nice clean dunkel.
Pretty color.
Yeah, it looks like a dunkel. Basically tastes like a dunkel. All the malts in here are dark. There's no light malts in here. Giving myself a short one since I've had it. And it's a dark Munich. A new malt that I've just seen called Bohemian Pilsner Dark, which is interesting. A dark version of a Bohemian Pilsner. Yeah, it's interesting. I'd never heard of it either, so I thought I'd try it. But as you can see, the color works good. It's clear, all dark malts in it, but no big roasty malts. So it's all done with dark malts, and the smoke is subtle.
I pick up the smoke, but it's not overpowering. It's not dominating. It's just a component in the whole.
Yeah, and you get the nice sort of sweet, dunkel-y malt character too coming through. And this is only 5%, and I don't do many beers in that range, so I wanted to do something interesting.
Whoa! I normally spit, but I had to swallow that. That's delicious. I've never had anything quite like it.
Nice and smooth. Tastes like a lager.
So beautifully balanced, and yet you got smoke on the finish and smoke on the nose initially.
Yeah.
Yep. I love it.
And it's if you could say this about a smoke beer, it's sort of refreshing. You can picture this on a backyard barbecue real easily.
Oh yeah.
The other thing that's been nice is because this little canner, our lines are so short, I can get the carbonation levels really high.
I like carbonation.
Yeah,
I really do.
You got to get it to the right level, but so many people are limited by cans that they're saying the volumes of CO2 at like 2.62. This was 2.8, which is really pretty high.
I heard it's hard to get CO2 right now.
It is hard to get CO2, but I try to get most of the CO2 that comes in the beer is produced naturally. I could see no reason for blowing the CO2 all out and then buying CO2 and putting it back in.
Hallelujah, brother.
The beer. So I bung them off when they're still still fermenting. So when they're done and they're down to about a third left to go, then I just close off and let them start building up the CO2 in there by themselves. It creates a finer bubble, I believe.
I think so.
Yeah,
that's why
it's the method champagne. It's the champagne method. That's what it is. So I'm doing some experimenting too with doing some can conditioning because A lot of the Belgian beers are much better when they're bottle conditioned.
Yes.
So I
you do that
thought,
with cans?
yeah, you know, it turns out you can. I started looking into it, and Allagash has been doing it. So I read this big thing about how Allagash does it, and it looks real feasible, especially since we have our own little canner. We can try some experiments. So I'll probably do it first on Golden Blonde and see what it does. But there's some nice things that happen when you have a little bit of fermentation that goes in the can. One is that anytime you can, you get a little bit of oxygen, for sure. Oxygen is the bane.
beer.
Yeah, it degrades anything, but particularly beer. So if you put a little bit of yeast in there, or leave a little bit of yeast in and add a little bit of priming sugar and let it ferment in the can just a tiny bit to get that last little bit of carb, it'll eat up all the oxygen too.
Perfect.
So now you have no oxygen left in that package. And you get the carbonation levels that you couldn't have gotten maybe with the canner alone.
With the finer bead, the finer bubble, and you also get no light getting in there.
Exactly.
I'm very, very
So I'm thinking for Saisons, it'd be perfect because Saisons should be bottle conditioned. They just should be. They always have been traditionally. And I hate to put, you know, squirt CO2 into a beer and then put it in a can and call it a Saison. It's kind of like, it's not right. It's not traditional. So I'm going to try to do the Saison with bottle conditioning. We'll see.
I love the way this guy thinks. I really do. You're a master brewer for a reason.
I'm really impressed.
I've known him for years. I
can't
couldn't
wait until this tap room opens.
It's going to be fun. It's
I
gonna be
hear you're
fun.
going to have 21 taps and 5 bathrooms. How perfect for a beer brewery.
Yeah, I know. 5 bathrooms plus a baby's changing station, and it's going to be child friendly. They wanted to make it really good for family. This is a double IPA. It's called the Wave. It's Galaxy and Citra hops. And we just canned this like 10 minutes ago, or you just had it on film?
Oh man, this is the freshest beer I've had in a long time.
And again, look at the carb level that you get from the canning there.
Oh, look at that beautiful head. Yeah. And we still got those tiny bubbles coming out.
Tiny bubbles.
This beer has also has rye, quite a bit of rye.
Really?
Yeah, and crystal rye also. Crystal rye is an interesting one. Typically, brewers use crystal malts to add.
I know about crystal malts.
Yeah, dextrins and sweetness. Well, the crystal rye is a really interesting one because you can add the same flavor components, but it keeps the beer mouthfeel and the taste more dry. So it doesn't add as much sweetness, at least perceived sweetness. The rye makes it dry, so it's nice to be able to use rye.
Oh, that is so beautiful.
You know, there's something to be said for an old school double IPA that's just, it is sort of old school these days, but it's a good old school.
It's a classic, is what it is, and this is so beautifully balanced. I love it. You get the Citra up front, but you get the mosaic.
A Galaxy,
at the finish.
Yeah.
And it's got a beautiful bitter finish, but rich, ripe mouthfeel. I love this beer.
Yeah, and that's called the Wave. That's available in 6-packs all over.
Yeah, Safeway has it.
Safeway has it. 3 local Safeways, so Bainbridge Island, Kingston, and Paulsbo. Right now, soon to be at others. All right, so let's move on to the Belgians.
I love Belgium.
So this beer, my idea was to make a blonde like the blondes I'm used to in Belgium. They're an easy drinking beer. Not particularly strong by Belgian standards, 7-ish to 8-ish, but the ones I like had a unique flavor and were very drinkable. And so this is the Golden Blonde. Reason it's called the Golden Blonde was because in making it, it turned out to be a little darker than a blonde. Yeah. And I started calling it a Golden Blonde just because that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
And we decided to like the name. So it does have a little coriander, but not enough, I think, to actually pull out the distinct flavor. We used to centrifuge. This is not centrifuge. This is all naturally bright. So when people tell you the hazy beers are unfiltered, tell them that's just a bunch of hype. This is unfiltered. That's unfiltered.
You don't
need to filter to clarify. To make a hazy, you have to work hard to make a stable haze. So people are actually adding things to make it hazy.
Like sugar.
Yeah, well, yeah, and flour and wheat and oats, and you add that stuff to make them hazy, and then you go around telling people that it's unfiltered. It's kind of a little bit misleading. Not everybody does that, but some do. So little hints of coriander.
Yeah, I picked that up right in the mid palate, but it's got such a ripe, rich mouthfeel, and yet it's not heavy at all. It's very well balanced.
Nice
What's
and
that
easy
I'm
to drink.
tasting on the finish?
It's probably the malt. I mean, the hops too. So I do something that most Belgian brewers don't do. I added a lot more late hops. So Belgian brewers typically will add a bittering hop and maybe a tiny bit at the end. I use quite a bit of hops in the Whirlpool. Again, I just wanted to change the profile of just that one yeast. The other thing I do with this beer, the yeast that I use is very, very temperature sensitive. You can make all different kinds of flavors just by varying what temperature you ferment it at. So this beer I actually fermented at about 64 degrees, whereas Monk's I fermented at 70 degrees. And that 6 degrees makes a big difference in the amount of esters that you get. So this beer ferments slower. It's almost like lagering an ale, but it's
like slipping into a silk bathrobe. I'm telling you, it's so beautiful in texture on the palate. I love it.
And again, the natural carbonation, just you can't match that. Just the nice little fine, tiny bubbles. And you get the good head retention. So then we go from the Golden Blonde to the beer that I always am at a loss to describe to people. This is not what I would call a Belgian ale. It's a Belgian-American hybrid. And the reason why is that no Belgian brewer would ever put this much American hops in here. So, yeah, then I guess that's the Indiscretion, the Monk's Indiscretion. So it's got a lot of Citra hops, all at the end, so it's not bitter. The idea was to create a beer that's balanced like a Belgian triple. When I say balanced, I mean the bitter to sweet ratio is like a triple, but it's extremely hoppy. So like a not hoppy or not bitter IPA.
Us West Coast boys, we like hops.
Yeah, we do like our hops. And especially Citra. The thing about Citra is that it's so tropical anyway, and this yeast is all about bananas. And so you mix bananas with the tropicalness of the Citra and then the Cascade just to give your overall nice. And you end up with a beer that smells like no other. You can pretty much tell Monk's in a glass from anywhere. And it's 10%. Do something in this beer that a lot of people don't understand. And in fact, I think there's the Food Babe wrote about how bad it is and horrible that people add, I don't add corn sugar, but they're adding corn sugar to their beer as if that ever makes it into the person's system. It ferments.
No.
Yeah, so she's misleading people. If you add sugar to a beer, it does the opposite of what you think it would do. Most people would say that will make a beer more sweet, but it doesn't. It makes a beer less sweet because it ferments out 100%.
Dry.
So this beer
look at
drinks
this
like
beer,
an 8%.
You can't tell how wonderful.
Drinks like an 8% or 7%, but it's 10%. It's a full 10%. There's an interesting little thing about the 10%. Most of the distributors are scared to death about the 10% on the label because rule of thumb has always said that that's where the tax break happens and you have to start paying like 5 times the tax.
Right.
It's not. If you read the actual regulations, it says 8% ABW, alcohol by weight. Okay, so they don't do it based on alcohol by volume. So our alcohol by weight is less than 8%, but the ABV is 10%. So I did this, like years ago to actually test this. So I put 10% on all. The distributors have a fit with it. They think they're going to have to pay the higher tax rate, but they don't. And if anybody ever comes and asks me about it, I'll show them the records to show it's not 8% ABW. It's less.
Well, I got to tell you, from being in the retail end of this business, people love 10% beers. You get a premium for those. As well you should, because it takes more ingredients.
It does take more ingredients, and traditionally it's been thought that the tax rate is higher there. That's where it breaks. But 10 just looks better on a can. I think you'll see a lot of places where bottles have 9.9%, and that's a lot of people who are nervous about having to go up to the next tax bracket. So you'll see a lot of 9.9% beers.
This is so beautiful on the palate. I mean, it's just, oh my goodness.
So this beer won 2 awards in the U.S. Beer Open. It won a gold medal 2 years in the Anything Goes category because they didn't have a category for it.
They didn't have a category for it.
Yeah, now there is a Belgian-American hybrid. Unfortunately for me and Monk's, that one is Lafrique always wins it. So Lafrique is like sort of the standard by which the Belgian Americans are judged. So people will, you know how Americans are when they're judging beers. This needs to be just like this beer or it's not good. I saw a review of this recently on Untappd. Fantastic beer. Love this beer. Never had a beer I like better. But it's not a Golden Strong. So they marked it down and gave it 3.5 points instead of 5 because it wasn't a Golden Strong. Well, first of all, who told them it was a Golden Strong? I don't think I did. They just thought it was. Somebody told them it was a Golden Strong. And so they thought, that's what I'm judging it against. So it needs to taste like this certain beer. And Belgians aren't like that. I mean, you go to Belgium and every beer tastes totally different. And you're not going to see them saying, this beer isn't taste like that other one. It's not supposed to. You go, and there's 350 beers in a good Belgian beer bar for a reason. They're all different. You know, you really can, and they all have their own unique glasses. It's really amazing to sit in a bar in Belgium and order a beer, and it's almost all bottle culture there. There's very little draft. And you order a beer, and they say, well, would you like another beer while you wait? Because those glasses are being used right now. You know, we only have 4 of those glasses, and they're being used. So you're looking over at the other table and going, well, are you going to drink that again? Or you? And most people will go switch to another beer. So you usually have
350 choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Stick with one.
Exactly.
Like a little kid in a candy store.
Oh, it so is. Belgium is just like that for beer people. It really is. Have a little goat on front. Now it's probably going to be used.
This has been so incredibly knowledgeable and fun, and I've always had so much respect for you, even more now.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you for having us.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming, guys. It's been fun. It's not often I get to drink at 11 o'clock in the morning, but okay.
What other time is there?
Yeah.